In North Carolina, every single agency agreement has to be in writing from the offset of the relationship, with the exception of oral buyer agency. That is the only one that does not have to be in writing. And so it is two things. It is non-exclusive, meaning you cannot bind them to just you. They can have an oral buyer agency relationship with as many other brokers as they want to. And it is what we call open-ended. You cannot set it for a set period of time. Let's say that Brandy is single as they come, and she gets done with the exam review today, and she pulls up Tinder or Bumble or whatever she wants to be on, right? Some kind of dating app. And she starts scrolling through, and she scrolls through, and she matches with 4 very handsome men. Folks, let me ask you a question. Can Brandy go out and get dinner with Brian, Mark, Paul, and Lucas, and it's fine? Can she go out and get dinner with all of those folks? Sure. You know what that's called? That's called a date. Seeing if they have any chemistry. That's what oral buyer agency is. It is just feeling each other out. You can date other brokers in oral buyer agency. So if somebody had an oral buyer agency agreement with Brandy, all these 4 men, right? She can date all of them. But here's what happens. Once things get serious with Brian and they say, we're in a relationship now, and they make it Facebook official. If she goes out with any of those other fellas, is it a problem? Yeah. Lucy, you got some explaining to do now, don't you? Right? You're like, we're in a relationship. You can't be going and getting steak dinners from Marco and, Pablo and all these other people. That's the difference. Could Brandy have ghosted all 4 of those men and never had a relationship with any of them? Sure, she could have. That's how oral buyer agency works. It is non-exclusive. You can't bind them to you. Are we doing stuff together? Yes. Am I hoping that it's going to turn into a relationship? Yes. But you can ghost me at any time until we put it in writing. Once we do that, then it is an exclusive relationship. Now, if you were to go have lunch or dinner with anybody else, it's a problem. That's oral buyer agency. So the deadline, you can be in an oral buyer agency relationship up until the point that they want to put an offer in on a property. At that point, you have to reduce it to writing. Let me explain seller subagency. I told you one, the other, or both. You either represent in North Carolina a buyer, a seller, or both. You have to represent somebody in North Carolina. We do not have facilitating or transactional brokerage. Brandy picks up the phone and she calls me. She says, hey, Seth, I found you on Zillow. I'd like to see 123 Main Street. Can you take me to go look at it? I say, sure, Brandy, let's go. So when I go and I meet Brandy and we start talking about what she's looking for and she starts to talk about what she's pre-approved for, I'm going to stop her and I'm going to do what? I'm going to give her the agency disclosure, right? Because we're getting into that first substantial contact. So I'm going to say, Brandy, let me explain how agency works. I'm going to give her a copy of the Working with Real Estate Agents disclosure form. And I'm going to say, Brandy, understand that there's buyer's agents that could represent you as a buyer. There's listing agents, right? They represent sellers. There's dual agency, of which could be designated. And Brandy, understand that you could also represent yourself. You don't have to have an agent. And once I explain that, I'm going to ask her to sign this agency disclosure. All it is disclosure. Now, what's the next step? Working with Real Estate Agents disclosure is a menu. What happens after you look at the menu? You pick something. That's exactly right. So now I'm going to say, Brandy, now that I've explained all that to you, I'd love to be your buyer's agent. Brandy, can I do that? Our options are, if she says yes, we can sign a written buyer agency agreement, or we can have an oral buyer agency agreement. Now, let me remind you of a very important and testable word. Regardless, our agreement is going to be an express agreement. It could be orally stated or stated in writing. It just means we've talked about it. Folks, if I was to just throw Brandy in my car and say, let's go see houses, that would be an implied agency relationship. My actions look like we're working together. We don't do implied. Implied is illegal in North Carolina. So we would have to have a stated, right? Express means stated. So I'd say, Brandy, we can have a written agency agreement or we can have an oral. Even if it's oral, I'm going to say something like this. Hey, Brandy, I'm going to be representing you as your buyer agent. It's an oral capacity. We would have to reduce it to writing at the time that you wanted to submit an offer on a property. If I get you under contract on a property, I expect to make about 2.4, 2.5%. If you want to see a home listed by my firm, you would have to consent to dual agency. So I could show you this home listed by my firm, so on and so forth. Brandy, does this all sound fine? And Brandy says, yes. That's an oral buyer agency agreement. It's not just get in the car, let's see pretty houses. It has to be expressed. Let's say it's Alicia's listing. And I say, Brandy, I'd love to be your buyer's agent. Can I do that? And Brandy's like, nope. I watch Selling Sunset and I don't need an agent, right? Or I watch HGTV. I don't need an agent. So just open the door to the pretty house and let me see it. And I'm just going to look at her and be like, uh-huh. All right, Brandy. Hey, listen, remember when I said that you could be unrepresented? I didn't recommend it, but since you're going to go that way, let me remind you that I can assist you, but I can only assist you as a what? What would I be helping Brandy as? If I can't represent the buyer, the only other person I can be representing is the seller. So I would be considered a seller subagent. Here's what would happen. It's Alicia's listing. So I would pick up the phone and I call Alicia. I say, Alicia, hey girl, listen, I've got this buyer customer who doesn't want to work with me, but they want to see your listing. Can I work as a subagent for you and your seller? And if Alicia says yes, then we can do it. Okay. If I have authorization to act as a seller subagent, I'm going to open the door for Brandy and I'm going to show her the house. But all the while she's a customer, my loyalties are to who? Alicia, and more specifically, Alicia's seller. That is seller subagency. Remember, subagent just means agent of the agent. But when we talk about a seller subagent, it means you're basically once removed, but still representing the seller. So we go through the works and Brandy loves the house and she's oohing and eyeing and she gets done with it. And she's like, Seth, I want to put an offer on this house. I say, great, I can draft that up for you, Brandy. What do you want to put on there? And she's like, well, what do you think I should put? And I say, well, Brandy, girl, why don't you go rewatch season 2 of Selling Sunset and come back at me and tell me what you want to offer, girl. Just go on and tell me. She's like, okay, it's listed at 400. I would pay 450 because I really want this house, but I'm going to get a good deal, Seth. And she's going to say, I want to offer 375. I say, great. Sounds good, Brandy. And I draft it up for her. I'm going to call Alicia. Now, this is another disclosure thing, folks. If I was a buyer's agent, the rules in North Carolina state that I would have to disclose at initial contact to the seller or the seller's agent that I was a buyer's agent. But I'm not a buyer's agent, am I? I already talked to Alicia and she knows I'm on her team because I'm a seller subagent. So now I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to say, Alicia, I've got this offer from that buyer customer I told you about, Brandy, and she's offering 375. Hey, but girl, listen, she'd go up to 450. So go on and tell the sellers to counter that offer and send it back at 450. She says, bet, I'll have it right over to you. Alicia's going to have the seller counter at 450. She's going to bring it back. And I'm like, Brandy, good news, girl. You got a counter offer. She's like, oh my God, already? That was quick. What's the counter for? I'm going to say 450. She's going to say, how did they know I would go up to 450? What is going on here, Seth? And I'm going to look her down the eye. I'm like, Brandy, I told him you'd go up to 450, girl, and I work for you. I'm a seller sub-agent, girl. I represent the seller. You should have said nothing in front of me. And that's seller sub-agency. This can happen in a couple of different ways because when you have loyalties to somebody, you have loyalties to them. Brandy never hired me from the word go. She said, I don't need an agent. So I automatically could only help her as a seller sub-agent. Well, now understand, if you want to know real world, odds are probably good that Alicia didn't even want me working as a seller sub-agent. So if we back up and I call her and I say, hey, Alicia, can I work as a seller sub-agent? And she says no, what would I do at that point? I would say, well, Alicia, will you at least pay me a referral fee if I send you Brandy's information? Maybe that'll work out. If she doesn't want to sell her sub-agency, maybe I work out a deal with Alicia that I'll just send her Brandy's information. If Brandy buys it, then I get a referral fee. And if I can't do that, you know what I'm going to say? There's Alicia's sign. Call her and waste somebody else's time. Because we're not a charity, right? I can't even show it to her unless I can represent somebody. That would be a legal brokerage activity. I have to represent somebody in North Carolina. And if it's not the buyer, it's the seller. And if it's not the seller, then I'm out. Let's go back to the scenario where I counted at 450. And Brandy was all mad as fire. And she says, well, Seth, I've changed my mind. I want you to represent me. You fix this mess. Could I switch and become a buyer's agent with permission of the seller? You're changing teams. You would have to get permission from the other team. So I'd call up Alicia and be, hey, Alicia, Brandy's all mad that we did our jobs right. She wants me to represent her now. Can you ask the seller if he cares if I turn into a buyer's agent? What's the seller going to say to Alicia? Well, he's going to say, it doesn't matter to me. And Alicia's like, nah, dog. We already know she'll go up to 450. The damage has been done. Let's Seth switch. Doesn't matter. We were going to pay him anyway. Could we still potentially try to negotiate down? Because just because Brandy said she'd go to 450 doesn't mean that she will. So we could try to fix it. But could you switch teams? Yes, with consent of the parties. Let's say that instead of saying, no, I don't need an agent, Brandy says, yes, you can be my buyer's agent, but I only want an oral buyer agency agreement right now. I don't want anything in writing yet. I say, great, Brandy, we can do that. And so it's express. I state it all. And then we get done showing the house and she tells me what she's pre-approved for. She gives me all of her secrets, right? Because I'm what? Her agent, even in an oral buyer capacity. So then when we get done, I say, all right, Brandy, great. Let's put this offer together, girl. Remember, I told you we have to put it in writing now that you want to submit an offer. And now she looks at me and says, no, I don't want to sign that. I say, Brandy, girl, I'm begging you. You've got to sign this. If you don't sign this, I can't put an offer in for you as your buyer's agent. And she says, nope, I'm not signing it. Can I still put an offer in for her? As a seller sub-agent, everybody understand this. If I had an oral buyer agency agreement with Brandy, she was my client. It was not exclusive. It was open-ended, but she was still my client. I owed her old car. But the second she refused to reduce it to writing when we needed to put an offer in, the only other way that I could put an offer in for her would be to act as a seller sub-agent. You can understand the dangers. When I told her I was loyal to you, Brandy, and she told me her secrets, and now she's saying she doesn't want me to be loyal to her anymore. I can use and abuse her. I'm going to take her to the cleaners. So can I switch from a buyer's agent to a seller subagent? Yeah, as long as I tell every party it's a bad idea, right? And get consent. Now, what would be the reality, right? I said, Brandy, for the love of God, girl, I am going to mop the floor with you. Just sign this paper. I'm here to help you. Help me help you, right? Sign it. I'm just teaching you what they're going to ask you, right? There's all these crazy scenarios they can ask you. You've got to be very careful on the test. One word makes all the difference. If you see a test question that says Seth Chauncey with ABC Realty is working with Brandy as a buyer customer, that tells you everything you need to know. If she's a customer, then my loyalties are automatically to the seller. No ifs, ands, buts, or coconuts. We don't have to tell you that I have an agency agreement with the seller because I may be the direct listing agent. I may be a sub-agent. Doesn't matter. From North Carolina purposes, if I say you're working with a customer and that customer is a buyer, the only person you could be representing is a seller, either directly or indirectly. That word customer is critically important. Anytime that you've got a test question, you've got to be very careful with the verbiage, right? Sometimes they'll just say that this agent's with ABC, this agent's with ABC, and that's all they're giving you. This is the biggest thing that I tell you students say when they see the test questions. Seth, there wasn't enough information. Yes, there was. You just didn't catch it. Because if we told you that it was this firm and it's the same firm, the question was about dual agency. If we told you that it was a customer and this, then the question was about who you represented, and it wasn't the customer. We work with customers. We represent clients, right? Just because we're assisting you doesn't mean we work for you. If you're not a client, we don't work for you. We're not looking out for your best interest.
If you like this video, feel free to share it with a friend. For more real estate education content, please subscribe to the channel. From all of us at Seacoast Real Estate Academy, thank you for watching.